Welcome to Godless Bitches. I'm your host, Beth Presswood, here with Jen Peeples.
Hi, everybody.
Tracie Harris.
Howdy.
And Kim Rippere.
Hello.
Godless Bitches is a podcast of the Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational group dedicated to the separation of church and state and the promotion of positive atheism. The ACA also sponsors the Atheist Experience TV show and podcast and the Nonprofits podcast. You can contact GB using bitches at atheist-community.org, and you can comment on shows at godlessbitches.podbean.com. So how is everybody today?
Doing good.
Excellent. Yeah, pretty good.
All right, so we have a special guest today, Kim Rippere from Secular Woman, which is a new organization, I guess, for secular women. So why don't you tell us about it, Kim?
Well, the idea kind of came to its initial fruition, which is that we launched on June 28th. And so we have, sort of been out in the public sphere for just under 2 weeks at this point. And what we decided to do was work to amplify the voice, presence, and influence of non-religious women. That's actually our mission statement.
Sounds good. By the way, I will say that you scooped me.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You scooped me.
Oh, how did we do that?
Me, Rebecca Watson, Surly Amy, and a couple other people were thinking of doing this exact thing.
Wow.
Yes.
The time is ripe when that happens.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I was probably the laziest one. They had excuses, but I, didn't get our organization really off the ground. And so you did. So you did my work for me. So that's fine. I'm down with that.
So what was your idea? Because we want to make sure that we, have all the good ideas.
Well, it was to have a national organization. I think we were going to go with secular feminist or something. But, secular woman, that's good too. And it was going to be specifically a feminist secular organization that would try to bridge the gap. We'd bring, secularism and skepticism to feminists and, of course, women's issues to skeptics and atheists. So, And that was about as far as we got. And then you popped up. So, good for you.
Well, I'll tell you that I think that Bridget, who's our VP of Outreach, is developing sort of a story around our beginning, which has to do with the 40 days and 40 nights, and I can tell you it was fast and furious. That I had the idea literally being a passenger on the way home from Women in Secularism. I called Bridget and said, hey, I have this idea, like women, secularism, conference grants. And we talked about that for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And we were both excited. And so then we both thought that we had actually taken about a week to develop that idea before we reached out to people. And when I was going through and doing our timeline for Martin Pribble, the first Facebook group was actually created on that same day. So there was not a lot of lag time. When I was in college, I went to some colleges where you have this semester system and some were on the quarter. That semester system where you kind of do this lull between weeks 12 and 16 and you don't do much. And then you go on the quarter system, which is 12 weeks, and it is just complete work for 12 weeks, and you're brain dead at the end of it. I think that's what our 40 days and 40 nights was. It was a quarter, and there was not a moment to breathe, because honestly, the website took 2 weeks, and we worked night and day on it. because we wrote all the language, and we're hosting the domain and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of work in the website.
And what is that website? What's the address?
It is secularwoman.org.
And you have a Facebook group as well. Everyone has a Facebook group.
True, we do, which is /secularwoman. It's amazing how all this coordinates, isn't it? We have a Twitter too, which is, how shall I say that? Secular Woman.
Awesome. And why the name? And why the singular form?
I actually am working on a president's blog about this, so I'm glad I'm prepared. I guess there's two components. One, we've been asked a lot of questions about, secular, and I would say I'm newer to the movement and being out. And so sometimes when we talk about terms, to me, secular, I immediately think separation of church and state.
Mm-hmm.
And when we started talking about that, Mary Ellen has, on so many facets, is incredible. On this in particular, very early on, she said, "Is that the only sort of secularism that you mean?" And when we talked about it, it really wasn't the only sort of secularism that we meant. We meant this secular worldview overall without religion. And one thing for me that really hones that idea is at Women in Secularism, Miss Hutchinson talked about one of the reasons that young women of color end up going back to church and becoming more religious is because churches offer free daycare.
Mm-hmm.
If it's that easy to get somebody to be religious, I want to be offering free daycare.
Yeah.
And that really has nothing to do with the separation of church and state. That has to do with the secular worldview.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where secular comes from. And then the singular does not have such a history, and especially not coming from me. And this is what I'll tell you, and this is why. I thought we were secular woman, plural, for a very long time. And all of our private groups were women with an E, because I made them. And finally somebody said, we agreed on woman with an A. So what are you talking about? Because when you do this verbally, woman, it's not always that clear. And so that's sort of the story there. And from the singular, it really didn't make that much difference to me. And whether it was plural or singular, I think that for me, what I do is I use that it's the singular as plural, and talk.
Sorry, that's me. Sorry, I will mute myself.
Wow, that's loud. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. We talked to some people, but not that many. I think there were probably, honestly, less than 12 people on the planet who knew we were doing this. So we talked to some people, including publicists or journalists and people who would be contacting us about whether it was singular or plural and which made more sense. Mm-hmm. Everybody had an opinion. None of them matched. Nobody really cared that much. And so we ended up singular.
All right. Well, one of the considerations that we were going for when we were thinking about starting a group was secular. We didn't want to alienate people who might not use the A word. Was that also your feeling on it?
Well, we always wanted it to be about secular, and we never really had discussions about atheism. We're not afraid of that, but we also not everybody identifies as an atheist. Some people have other identifications that are a priority to them. So for us, it's about being secular. And I might be an atheist. I might identify as a humanist. I might identify however I want to identify. But in addition, I identify with secularism. So, for instance, we've done some testing with Google AdWords, and we have used atheism there, and we are clearly not afraid of that word, and anticipate that many of our members will be atheists.
Yeah, I think so. But I think it's good to be inclusive of people who may not use it or may not use it yet.
Correct.
So, yeah. Well, let's see. We might as well just go right into it. Everybody's always asking about the harassment issue. Is there an official position on harassment, or was that a consideration in forming the group, or any of that?
I think one thing that's sort of happened since Women in Secularism is that this idea of harassment has sort of mushroomed and gotten much bigger and gotten a lot of attention. And I'm not saying that that's a bad idea. What I'm saying is that at Women in Secularism, and I think Center for Inquiry has tried to bring this to light, this idea of harassment and some sort of list of men and things like that was seriously an offhand comment that if it took more than 5 minutes, and I really want to say 2, and I might go down to 30 seconds of the entire conference, I'd be surprised. So when this idea first came to me, sexual harassment was something in my mind, but really the idea was about empowering women and didn't have anything to do with sexual harassment. And I think that that's an issue that via the internet has really been brought to light and reviewed extensively.
Yeah. So, Jen and Tracie, do you have any specific things you'd like to ask him?
I don't right now. I'm enjoying listening to her talk about the group, though.
Yeah,
well, one of the things that you asked, I'm sorry, Beth, one of the things you also asked was, what you're trying to get at is, what is Secular Woman's stance as it relates to sexual harassment?
Yeah.
And
hello? Did we lose her?
I show her still on the call.
Yeah, I'm showing her still on the call, but...
Okay, a little hiccup there with Skype. Go ahead, Kim.
So I'm not quite sure where we left off, but the value of Secular Woman that addresses this harassment issue directly is we affirm that everyone has the right to feel safe, confident, and secure in their personal and emotional interactions. We oppose harassment, bullying, objectification, and other forms of aggression, both physical and non-physical, in all settings. And I think that speaks for itself. And I think that this idea of bullying is something that many pieces of our culture are dealing with. That's what It Gets Better is about bullying as well. And we're seeing that culture-wide. And it's not just a matter of atheism or secularism or our community dealing with it, but as a culture learning how to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think we're slowly getting better. I think we're having some growing pains in the atheist movement specifically, but I also think more and more people are getting it. And the fact that soon there's not going to be any conference you can go to that's not going to have a specific harassment policy.
That's certainly my impression and something that we're encouraging. And again, we have this sexual or anti-harassment, excuse me. We have my air conditioning out, so everybody's hot.
Okay.
Yeah, I live in hot Atlanta, and it's hot with no air conditioning.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. We know a little bit about heat here in Texas. So.
Yeah. So, Secular Woman does have, hang on a minute. Are you almost done, Edward? Sorry. I forced him upstairs to the third floor where there's no conditioning with the dog. So there you have that. So Secular Woman has an anti-harassment policy registry. And that's how we are supporting the organizations and conventions that are putting these policies in place so that women and men, everybody can go to one place and see, hopefully in one place, and see who has a policy and who doesn't. And I know that to date, there have been a few that we have reached out to that have declined, that are currently declining to do it and have decided to use, the law of the state that they're running in, and that they believe that's sufficient. Mm-hmm. And that's a choice that they'll make for their organization.
People can choose whether or not to go to conferences like that.
Correct.
So that's a really good thing. So if anybody's thinking of going to a conference, you can just go to secularwoman.org and look that up, which, by the way, the American Atheist Conference on Easter weekend, which will be here in Austin in 2013.
I'm so excited.
Are you coming?
I am. I think I just I just found a roomie and we got a hotel.
Oh, yay. It's going to be so fun. Are you going to have a booth?
We have not gotten that far.
All right. Well,
I'm sure we will, but we have. I can't say yes because we haven't gotten that far.
All right. Well, pretty sure the ACA is going to have a huge presence there, and Godless Bitches, we're doing a podcast there. I'm pretty sure Dave and Matt talked about that this weekend when he was at the Secular Student Alliance conference. So
great.
Yeah, that might be something Secular Woman could look into, partnering with the SSA and, getting some campus groups and everything. I know y'all are really young, but might be something.
Well, I can't say who we're in discussions with,
but
there are lots of things. There are lots of discussions happening.
Very good. Very good. So, I had questions and we got off track and everything, which is fine. This is a totally free-form podcast, but so you went to Women in Secularism and kind of got this idea. And what do you see as some of the biggest issues for women in the secular movement?
I don't know that I have a good answer for that, if you want to know the truth. I think I need to talk to a lot more women.
True.
Who have had those experiences, and I think, over years, because I don't know that I've only been out in the community. It's only this year. It's only 2012, and I've been to, Reason Rally, American Atheist Convention, and Women in Secularism. Mm-hmm. So I really feel like I need to have more conversations. I know that when I talk to people who have been in atheism and secularism for 5-10 years, that they all the women have stories. And most of them do not talk about how they were treated equally. So I think that one of the things that we don't have is this clear idea of, and are well able to articulate, or at least I'm not, when the structure is not working for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to have lots of conversations, as would everybody at Secular Woman, about women's experiences and how we can make those better.
Yeah, and so what's your testimony then? As far as, did you grow up with religion or particularly patriarchal religion?
I grew up, no, my story is uninteresting. How about that? I was born in 1965. My parents were married. They were not part of the sort of 60s love fest. They were still part of the older sort of 50s dress nice every day kind of thing, the sort of anti-hippie. And my mom's mother is exceedingly religious and would have been a nun.
Wow.
And I'm still trying to sort of tease out of her why she's not a nun. On the other hand, she is 92 this year and has a college degree.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fairly incredible. And then, so I grew up, I'm young in the early 70s when, they're starting to talk about feminism and those kind of ideals. And I'm one of two girls. My sister's 6 years younger than me. And so there were no boys in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to my parents about this actually pretty recently, in that my parents intentionally raised me in particular to be highly independent, to think for myself, and to depend on no one but myself.
Pretty progressive.
You can trust somebody. My mom was until recently. Recently, she got married and moved to North Florida, and it's kind of scary. There's a lot of Fox News in that house.
Ooh.
Yeah. But at the time, I think they were sort of in a range of normal and progressive, at least in how they lived. Whether that's how they voted, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And because there were no boys, it never occurred to me that boys and girls were treated different. I did not grow up with that model. So I grew up with a model where men and women are equal. And then religion really was not a factor in my house. I did go to parochial school for a couple of years in elementary school. It was extremely liberal. I did go to church, but it never made a lick of sense to me. One of the things on my bio on my blog says, and this is true, I used to sit in church or kneel in church at the pews. It was Catholic church, and look out of the side of my eye at everybody else going, what are they doing? And I think somebody would have really had to say to me very clearly, because I never remember understanding this, that people thought that there was this invisible God who saw everything that you did. And when you kneeled, what you were supposed to do was talk to him and pray for him to be nice to you. And without that level of connectivity, I never understood the activity. So that's really my church, and my parents are both some level of agnostic at this point, and that's generally how I was raised, where religion is just unimportant.
Mm-hmm. So when did you first get interested in feminism then, and women's issues?
Well, I think, and I talk about this on my blog too, I'm in my mid to late 40s, and I took feminism and feminist issues for granted. And I think a lot of people in my age group did. And honestly, there aren't that many people in my age group to begin with. We're a very small piece of a generation. We thought that these issues were handled and done, and we did not need to speak out about them or notice what was going on. And we didn't. And that is, I am ashamed of that today. Quite ashamed.
Well, I'm in your age group too.
Hey!
Yeah. And I have to agree. I mean, I remember in the 70s, and a lot of really exciting things were happening in feminism. And, it was news, and and these really outrageous women were getting things done. And some famous, truly awesome women were coming forward and saying, hey, I'm a feminist too. And, like Marlo Thomas. And then men were coming forward and saying, hey, I'm a feminist too. And so it was like, you had this feeling like, wow, we're really getting somewhere now. And I remember being, in the early 80s and being involved with the National Organization for Women, the Birmingham chapter and stuff, and doing clinic escort for an abortion clinic, and doing, letter writing and stuff like that for legislators to block abortion restrictions and stuff like that. And, this was back before email and stuff, and so everything was handwritten. And, we had our signature bank where we had permission to use people's names and addresses for specific issues like, reproductive rights or equal rights or something like that. And we'd sit there and sign all the letters and stuff the envelopes and put them in a bag. And it was almost like the Pony Express. We'd have somebody from Huntsville now drive to Birmingham with the bag of letters. And then by the time they got to Birmingham to drop off their bag of stuff for the legislators, the Birmingham Now people would have our stuff in a bag.
It's a Pony Express.
Yeah, it was exactly that. I mean, we'd hand it to somebody who was leaving Birmingham to drive to Montgomery. And then you'd have somebody from Mobile driving their stuff, up from Mobile to Montgomery and stuff like that. And so that's how we got stuff. So the next morning when, the legislators would come in, they'd have, these huge piles of mail sitting on their desk. And, they had staffers that had to go through that and count all the correspondence they got from all these people. That's how we did it. That's, and I left that experience thinking that, a small group of people can really make a huge difference. And I left and went in the Army. And that was a hugely radicalizing experience. And, I went from there to Fort Hood, or not Fort Hood, but Fort Sill, Oklahoma, for the artillery school. And I was one of 2 women in a class of 72. And I had to put up with enlisted men, staring inappropriately, making inappropriate comments, wolf whistles, things like that. And, I was an officer, and of course I confronted them. And they were astonished that a woman would confront them, because the view was, this is normal male behavior. And you can't change this. And, you're a total bitch for even suggesting that they change their behavior. And, I look back on that experience, and that's sort of the feeling that I get from some of the reactions of some of the men in the secular community right now. That, when you call someone on behavior, that it isn't that I feel threatened by it, or that, I think they're, dangerous or anything like that. It's just obnoxious behavior. And you call them on it, and they act like, well, what are you talking about? This is, you should expect this. Why are you so uptight? You should lighten up. And so, you mentioned earlier that, so, or Beth mentioned that we're kind of going through some growing pains. And I see it, in a lot of the reactions that I'm seeing with some of the people in the secular community right now. It's definitely growing pains.
What I really see on that, and I do completely agree and see your point, what I point to is that we have a tremendous number, and I would say percentage, of the general population of men in atheism and secularism, and of the big voices that are supportive of feminism as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And our outlook. And I think that is something that my guess is in the Army in the 1980s and 90s you did not have.
Well, it was kind of surprising, because there were a lot of men who were very supportive. And part of that was that in the 80s in particular, you started to have a lot of men who were married to fellow Army officers. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of got to see this firsthand with someone that they cared about, that they knew personally. They saw what was going on, and they realized that, it's not just people overreacting. There's some pretty
It's amazing it's amazing what it being a personal experience, even if it's, quote, just your spouse, but to bring that experience very close to somebody, in many cases, not all, sadly.
Yeah. And so, there were plenty of men who were very supportive of women in the military. Unfortunately, we were dealing with a system that there was this kind of entrenched view that this was a job for men, and that women were the interlopers here. And, you had to pay your dues, and that meant, put up with bad behavior in addition to, do your regular job. I don't think we have that hurdle to go through within the secular community. But I think what we're seeing is that we've got groups of men who for a long time have assumed that they were egalitarian and, very fair-minded or whatever. And no one's really pointed out some aspects of their behavior that really don't, are not very egalitarian. And I think there are some of these views, and it's not fun to have somebody tell you, well, the way you're presenting yourself, it's not really the way you think you are. And so I think there's a little bit of pushback there. It's hard to hear some of this stuff.
Yeah, one of the things I'd just say is, I'm okay with egalitarian so long as I'm not treated like a guy.
I love that.
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot. The idea that there's this sort of misconception that in order to be equal, you have to fit a male framework. Like equal means men, and it's using men and male traditional attributes as like a standard, and saying if you want to be equal, then you have to be like a man. And it's like, no, I want you to consider me equal and respect that I'm a woman.
Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting that came out for me in this discussion, in the internet discussion about sexual harassment, was one of the bloggers on Free Thought blogs talked about hyper-skepticism. And I found that very, very interesting. Like, to what degree do you have to prove something for it to matter? And what I see happen a lot is that women's emotional lives are discounted with this hyper-skepticism.
Yeah, it's almost like there's no standard of evidence. If you had a video of you being harassed or raped, there are people out there who would say something like, oh, well, right before that video, you must have been flirting or asking for it or doing this or that or the other. It's,
Well, and my point really speaks to the fact that you can't, and I have a degree in philosophy. You can't know my how I react in my internal life. There is no way for somebody else to know that. And if I am getting too many unwanted sexual advances, or if I'm being sexually harassed, I don't think that the way to approach that is to hold me up as a potential sort of victim of those to hyper-skepticism.
Right. And I think that, well, I was just reading some stuff recently on this just world hypothesis. And I think that a lot of people that engage in this sort of hyper-skepticism when it comes to sexual harassment claims in particular, they're laboring under this just world hypothesis, which is sort of a cognitive bias that basically says that the world is fair and you get what's coming to you. And so if something bad happens to you, you must have done something, to cause it, or at least to not prevent it. And so I think a lot of people that, that engage in this hyper-skepticism, they're kind of laboring under this just world bias, and they think that certainly you've done something to deserve it. There was actually some work back in the 70s, interestingly enough, where some researchers looked at this more closely, and they set up a scenario where a man and a woman were interacting, and it was kind of a scripted interaction, and then they had two endings. One ending was a marriage proposal, and in the other ending, the man raped the woman. And so they presented these scenarios to groups of people, and then they asked them after the fact, to assess the interaction. Were there clues as to, what was going to happen? And in the case where the man raped the woman, there was kind of a universal view that the rape was inevitable and the woman should have seen it coming, and the fact that she didn't made her somehow complicit. In the meantime, there was exactly the same interaction. The only change was there was a marriage proposal at the end instead of a rape. And in that situation, people did not, see anything threatening about the interaction at all. So
hindsight.
It's
like the illumination of hindsight.
Yeah. So it's very interesting that, people will go to great lengths to try to assign
justify.
responsibility.
Yeah.
Assign responsibility for bad things that happen to people, because that's the way they maintain this, just world view.
Well, I also think, to be fair, I think to some degree, people like to think they can protect themselves.
Of course,
so there's always
a
this
defense mechanism.
Yeah, there's this thing at work that says, well, what would I have been safer? Would I have been more vigilant? Would I have? And I think certainly there are things that people can do to avoid problematic situations. Like I remember when Elevator Gate came up, Jen, and you were saying, what if she would have gone to the room and something bad would have happened? How many people would say, oh, well, you didn't know that's what was going to happen? There would always be these people who are like, this is what's going to happen, and I do think it would have seemed a little weird for somebody to just randomly take a stranger's invitation to a hotel room in the middle of the night that they just met in an elevator. You know what I mean? It would be a strange thing to do. And certainly people that commit crimes like rape or mugging or whatever, they do look for opportunity, and so there's this whole thing about like, oh, don't make yourself an easy mark if you can avoid it. And I do get the idea of, wanting to not put yourself in a dangerous situation, but at the same time, it never becomes anybody's fault but the criminal. Never.
Right. This is, and this is me sort of personally, not necessarily as the president of Secular Woman. I was telling Beth before we started recording that I do have a history with Slut Walk, in that I have a group that is for all of the Slut Walk planners throughout the world. They all speak English. I'll leave it at that. And so that's a group that I manage and moderate and founded. And one of the things that, Slut Walk really has done is they completely changed that conversation from don't get raped, which was, I think, the only thing that any of us have ever been told. And by that, I mean for centuries. They changed that conversation to don't rape and put the blame really, I think, where it belongs. And that is a continuing conversation. But what I see is clearly that I think it's two sides. One, as a woman, I want to make sure that I do what I can to be safe. But the other side is to sort of change this idea of a rape culture into a culture where we blame the rapist and we respect that it's not really about the victim.
Yeah. To me, it should always be in the forefront of everyone's mind that no one should ever have to walk around protecting themselves against a rape. That, to me, I know that realistically, if we could eliminate rape in society, we would probably have done so by now. I think people would want to eliminate that. But at the same time, that this is a real thing that happens, And so you walk around and you have it in your head that this is a real thing that happens. And so you do sort of think about personal safety. And it's no different than, the idea of don't leave valuables on your front car seat with your car sitting there and you're not in it. Everybody knows, don't leave packages and things in the car, put them in the trunk when you go somewhere and you're leaving the car. You don't want to make somebody bust your car window and, and get your stuff. And, but at the same time, the idea that you have to put your stuff in the trunk, we should all resent that person who makes all of us think I have to put my stuff in the trunk. That's the thing. That's why you blame the person who's willing to steal somebody's stuff out of their car every time. We shouldn't have to put our stuff in the trunk. Yeah, we do. And if we don't, we know, okay, yeah, there's criminals. And yes, my stuff got stolen. And maybe if I put it in the trunk, it wouldn't have gotten stolen. But you know what? If there wasn't a thief on the loose, it wouldn't have gotten stolen either.
Right. And this actually is the foundation. One of the foundations of rape culture is that we have to explain it.
Yeah.
One of the things that they're not going around Facebook right now, so I can't put my hands on one, but a couple months ago, some of the memes that were going around were, you don't get blamed when you're a murderer. You don't have to explain that when you're dead, you didn't do anything wrong. You don't blame the person whose home was broken into. It's only the woman who's raped. It's only the victim, man or woman, trans, anybody who's raped. It's only the victim in rape that is vilified, that is shamed. And that is a product of rape culture.
Yeah, nobody would blame a child either. Like if a child got raped, nobody would say, well, what was that kid doing? What was she wearing?
Yeah, there actually was a judge a while, it's been quite a while back, that referred to, I believe it was a 5-year-old girl, referred to her as seductive.
Ugh.
Basically the guy who raped her was acquitted, and basically the judge said this 5-year-old child was seductive.
It makes you wonder what's on that judge's hard drive, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Well, and there was the case, it was in Texas, of a girl who was like maybe 12 and she got gang raped. And then they went around asking, they were doing interviews and stuff, and found a whole bunch of people who were saying that, oh, yeah, she always dressed slutty and hung around the boys, and we're basically victim blaming this shit out of her. I mean, yeah, there are some kids, they're less likely to be victim blamed, but there's even times when they victim blame kids.
Yeah.
I mean, that story was fucking crazy. I forget, but it was...
But that's the thing, though. It's crazy. You hear it and you just think that's insane, and it probably gets publicized as insane. But what Kim is talking about is like the pervasive nature of wondering what a woman did to deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there are some moments that stick out in my youth, and they actually all have to do with feminism. One was I was at my grandmother's house, probably early 20s. I was there with my husband and my grandfather. So there's the four of us. We're sitting around, and we were doing, I don't really like this grandmother, by the way. We were doing something in the house, and I think Oprah was on in the background, and there was a discussion about rape, and there was a woman there who was not dressed modestly, and she was a rape victim. Now this is, 1990, and my grandmother said, well, look what she's wearing, she deserved it.
Yeah.
Just floored me. Today I understand all the things that are wrong with saying that. At the time, I just knew it was revolting to hear that out of anybody, let alone someone I knew, let alone a woman.
Yeah, well, it's oftentimes women. I mean, it's this, internalized rape culture, patriarchy stuff. And they're tasked with enforcing it in a lot of ways. They're the ones that have to police what the girls wear and do the work of that.
Yeah, when I got divorced in the late 90s, I read this book, I think it was called Wife's Work. And really what it talks about is this wife, capital W, wife who she comes into being when you get married. And it's this idealized version of what a wife is. And it's women and it's women who do it to ourselves, and other women who sort of put this idea of what a good wife is onto us. And I know I totally bought into it. I told my husband that I wasn't his secretary and that he could send his mother he could deal with his mother and Mother's Day. And we got in a big fight about that. He finally looked at me and said, "Did I ever ask you to do anything?"
Had he? He hadn't?
No, it was something I put on myself because I got married. We were married, and so then it was my job.
That's interesting.
The the communicator, the one who kept the family together. Oh, he would never have asked me to do anything like that. Or the first
year.
So
why do you think you did it?
It's this idea of capital W, wife, of what a good wife is. What a good older woman is. How you interact with your family. And so
but what you're saying, and I just want to make sure I'm clear. So you were doing this, but you were also you weren't just internalizing, it sounds like to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you weren't saying that you were just internalizing this social expectation, but that you also were like inventing pressure that he was.
Oh, completely. Oh, yeah.
He's expecting this, and in his head, he's not even caring.
He didn't understand. He didn't have a clue what we were fighting about. I'm like,
that must have really confused him.
Yeah. The minute he said to me, "I never asked you to do this," I went,
right.
You're right. Or another kind of capital W thing that I did was we got married in June. That November, he was in the Navy and he was off on a Westpac. So he was gone for 6 months. Over Thanksgiving, now I cooked and I love to cook. That was the first Thanksgiving I ever cooked, and I was rabid to cook that. He wasn't even there, and it all had to do with what it meant to be a wife.
But, I mean, so you're saying that you didn't enjoy it, or
I did enjoy it, but you know how you can get completely focused on something and you don't know why?
Oh, yeah.
That's what it was. I was like OCD on this Thanksgiving. My mom lived an hour and a half away, would have been perfectly happy to do it. She'd been doing it for years. I'd been going to her house for years. But for some reason, this first year I got married, I had to do it.
Did you have any guests over, or was it just you?
It was my family. So I had maybe 10 people, friends and family.
Okay, but your husband was out. He was gone.
Right. He wasn't there.
Okay. Okay, no, that's interesting. Yeah, because I love Thanksgiving cooking. Like I'll cook and I love it, but I do it because I love it. And I know that like when, for example, when I was single, I used to do a big Thanksgiving and just invite anybody I knew who wasn't going home that had nowhere else to go. And so we would just be all a hodgepodge people that didn't have anywhere else to go would come to my house and have Thanksgiving.
Right, so, and I totally get that. It's my
but that's not what you're describing.
Yeah. And my insanity about cooking this.
I'm sitting here thinking, like, do I have any of these things in my head? Like, what do I do in my marriage where maybe I'm like, putting things into this? I mean, off the cuff, it's like I'm not prepared to answer because I haven't thought about it. But I'm sitting here now. I can tell I'm sitting here thinking about like my daily chores and things, and is there something that I do that I haven't thought out that it's like, why am I doing that? I know that I will fall into things. Like I'll fall into stuff. My husband travels, and I will fall into different patterns when he's home because there's this accommodation that's required when you live with somebody else. And then when he's gone, I completely fall. It takes me a while to fall out of them.
For me, when I think about this capital W wife, a lot of it has to do with sort of the role that you play as a woman in your relationship with your husband's family is where a lot of it will come out.
Did you live close to them?
No, and he didn't even like his family.
I keep trying to think of reasons.
No, there's no reason. Me,
okay.
Family, capital W wife. I mean, finally I said to him, I don't care what you do with your family. It's all you, and I will follow. And my choice to get out of being this capital W wife was, I will follow your lead in how you deal with your family.
Yeah, sure.
Anything else, we were going to fight about. We got along much better on that issue.
I bet. Once you let him know that you weren't going to do what he wasn't asking you to do, then it was all better.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you something funny, that it's not just in heterosexual relationships.
Sure.
I think, women in general, we fall into this idea that, we kind of shoulder a lot of responsibilities, even though nobody's putting that on us. Shortly before our son was born, my wife was talking about how she was going to have to restructure her morning in order to, get our son to daycare and then get to work on time and stuff like this. And she kept talking about this stuff. And I was just looking at her like, what are you talking about? And finally I said, babe, I work from home, like 3 blocks from the daycare center.
She was doing it.
Yeah, there's no reason why I can't take him to daycare and drop him off and pick him up. And she's like, oh yeah.
That's funny. And see, I can't even do stuff like my husband. I'm not allowed to touch his laundry. I can't do it right, apparently. So even when I try to be nice and say, I'm doing laundry, I'm going to throw your stuff in. No, because you don't know how to do it. Okay, I can't wash clothes, apparently. Mine are clean.
I like that system.
Yeah, he does the dishes, he does the vacuuming, he does litter boxes. He's really, I can't complain.
Yeah, that's kind of cool, though, when you get a division of labor like that.
Oh, it's awesome.
What somebody likes to do or prefers to do.
I cook, I do the mopping, I do, there is definitely a split in our house where it's just like, and with litter boxes, I should say, we share the load there. There's it's a 2-day week interval. I do them one day, he does them the other. And
we just switched the kitty litter. It's mine again.
That's funny. But we do have like some of those things that are, sort of the traditional roles, but I don't mind because it just happens to work for me as well. Like he's anal about doing the mowing the lawn, which is fine with me because I don't like mowing the lawn. He takes care of the cars. I'm good with that. I don't give a crap about cars. I've got Motor Club. That's all I need to know about my cars, that 800 number. So.
Yeah, well, Matt does most of the cooking around here, so that's definitely a good thing. Cooking and cars and lawn.
There you go.
But I do the laundry. He cannot stand to do the laundry. That's like his least favorite thing ever.
Oh, it's the easiest thing in the world.
I know.
Well, the way I do it. Apparently I don't do it right, but it's easy when you do it all wrong.
Well, we seem to have gotten way off topic, which is fine. So one thing I definitely did want to hit with Kim is, what is a secular woman's position on reproductive rights?
Oh, I love that question because we have a value. I think there's a couple that are related, actually, and most of them are, again, in this health and sexuality one. The first is that we support everyone's right to bodily and sexual autonomy. Gender expression, sexual orientation, and matters of intimacy are for individuals to determine. So that really lets you be whoever you are. And then we view age-appropriate, comprehensive medically accurate health and sex education is vital to responsible decision-making by young people. Sometimes it floors me, the things you have to say and put in writing. And the one that's most on point is we oppose all attempts to criminalize or limit access to comprehensive reproductive services such as contraception and abortion.
Woot! All right.
Excellent.
We're totally down with that. I can think of a group that isn't down with that, notably secular pro-life, but I don't think you'll be having too many problems with them. But yeah.
I don't understand. I mean, I think we all have to say that, a fetus does grow into a human being.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty clear. What I don't understand is prioritizing a fetus over me. And that's the choice that you have to make. And as far as I'm concerned, it's my body. And if anybody goes to my personal Facebook page, they'll see quite a while ago, just before Roe v. Wade anniversary, I posted something where my idea of this and my quote of this is, I am more than an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that addresses pretty clearly how I think about this.
Yes, us too. And I really think secular pro-life will talk up a good game, but I really think they're not going to get much traction in the secular community, because I think the data on what happens when you make abortion illegal, as well as the arguments from bodily rights, it's all on our side.
Correct.
Yeah.
The only thing on the other side really has to do with religion. In my estimation, I have not.
It's either a religious argument or it's a naturalistic fallacy.
Yeah.
Or appeal to emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're left with religious arguments or logical fallacies, and that's not much of a basis for policy.
No, I'd hope
healthcare.
Not. But we have a lot of very odd policy right now, with almost 1,000 bills introduced this year to limit women's access to health and reproduction.
Yeah, I like Rachel Maddow's discussion about this every night, where she talks about, how our Congress is totally focused on jobs, 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 and by that I mean abortion.
Right, yeah. Right.
I hadn't heard that, but that's pretty good.
Yeah.
So I did have something that I wanted to announce.
Sure.
That we're very excited about. There has been a lot of internet talk about us the last 2 weeks, and although we love that we're new and all those kinds of things, really an organization has to stop talking about its mission and living its mission. And what I want to talk about tonight is a way in which we are going to live our mission.
Mm-hmm.
And we are going to do some conference grants.
Some conference what?
Conference grants. We're going to help people go to Skepticon.
Okay.
So we are absolutely thrilled to begin and we've coordinated with Skepticon on this. So we're just really thrilled to begin sending women to conferences. And we are going to do at least 10, or help at least 10 women get to Skepticon.
Awesome. And
Wow.
How can these people apply?
That all sort of has to be worked out. And really, this is going to happen through Skepticon. They have a conference grant system that they're putting in place this year, and we are going to be supporting that system. On the other hand, when the podcast comes out, we will have a place up on our website where people can donate so that they can help us send women to Skepticon.
Awesome. So definitely, listeners out there, if you've got a few bucks, this is a great thing to do. This is actually a really good thing, because while we can always talk about, why do women believe more than men, and why do women not identify as atheist or secular, the fact is that even when you get women to identify as atheist or secular and want to be active, there's still a lot of economic issues. There's wage gaps, there's, kids and daycare issues. So, yeah, just flat out paying for women to come to the conferences.
Right.
That's grassroots shit right there. That's good stuff.
Yeah, we're very excited about the partnership with Skepticon and being able to do this with them, especially so early on, and to be able to announce, barely 2 weeks as a new organization to announce that we're doing this and to really start living our mission.
Yeah, and this is something that Amy Davis Roth had been doing with TAM. I think she sent 10 or a dozen women to TAM this year. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really, really great thing.
Yeah, and Skepticon actually has no fee, so this all has to do with travel and getting women actually there.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're just really excited to be living our mission. And I know that there's a lot of issues that come up for women when they go to try to do something like this. One of the last law firm that I managed, we had a lot of events for our clients. And let's say that the 3-day golf event on the coast for the guys sell out. We didn't, every year it was completely full, no issue, and we never had enough space. And we tried to get about 50% of that number. So let's say there was 500 men. We tried to get 250 women to go out 2 hours away to a nice hotel and get a spa treatment and just be there for the afternoon and hang out and enjoy themselves. That was a very difficult sell, to get women to disengage from their family, even for the afternoon. So there are a lot of things that hinder women, and what we're hoping is that money will not be one of them in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Richard Dawkins Foundation has been paying for childcare at some events as well. So for women that can get there but didn't have anybody to look after the kids, that's also a good thing. So yeah, I'm really excited about that too. I'm going to have to get this posted as soon as possible and not be lazy about it like I have been in the past. So you've got grants going and you're coming to American Atheist. What else? What are your plans, short term and long term, for Secular Woman?
I think the plan short term is to live our mission and to listen to women and find out what they need and how we can make a difference. And on an internal, I'll make a plea for volunteers. We have brought some volunteers on, but I'll say that our, quote, staff is less than 10 volunteers right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty daunting for 10 people.
Yeah.
So I think in the short term, it's to get some of the things that we said we're going to do and actually do them. And in the long term, we'd like to have 100,000 members and fully staffed in our own building.
All right. Sounds
I think
pretty
small,
good.
you can tell.
Does Secular Woman have any sort of focus on skepticism right now?
I guess I'd ask what you might mean by that.
Well, one of the things about, there's atheism and religious things, but there's also a lot of, woo and stuff that's directed toward women, like a lot of the alternative health claims. The anti-vax movement is comprised of a lot of women. There's some woo in the natural childbirth industry, things like that end up hurting a lot of women, and that I think are very important women's issues.
We're anti-woo.
Okay, good.
So again, back to one of our values, people are going to get tired of these. We embrace human-centered ethics formed by reason and science. We reject dogma, superstition, pseudoscience, and religious authority as sources of morality and truth. So one of the things that we need to figure out for Secular Woman and we need to develop is, how do all of these things and these values manifest in the real world? It's great to have them on a piece of paper, but what does that mean, and what we're doing in the world? And what I'd say is that some of these, we need more members and we need more people to participate, to flush them out and to help us. So we've had a lot of requests for a lot of things that are kind of not on our first tier of what we wanted to do. When we started this, we probably had a list of 30, 40 projects that we thought we might do. Mm-hmm. And part of sort of picking a release date, because we kind of went along and it was a couple of weeks and we were in a meeting, and at the end of the meeting I said, well, this is all well and good, when are we launching? And I picked a day. It was a Wednesday or a Tuesday that we had that meeting on, and on a Friday, and I picked the Friday of the following week. So I picked 10 days for us to launch, knowing that was impossible. And everybody said to me, well, okay, wow, how about that following Tuesday? So we picked a date 2 weeks out to launch on. Now, we ended up launching that week, but on Thursday. So what we had to do was look very closely at the projects and the programs that we wanted to do and figure out which ones could we develop sufficiently while we were developing a website and all the wording. So which ones could we develop in that 2 weeks to start with? And those are the projects that we started with. Things will, as we grow, as we mature, and as we lay a solid foundation in what we're doing today, new things will come on, and we will be doing new things all the time.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I hope to see lots of developments. I hope to help with some developments.
We hope so too.
All right.
One other thing I wanted to talk about, I wanted to give a little shout out to an IP attorney. Mm-hmm. She, the first or second day of our launch, she contacted us and has offered her intellectual property attorney services to us pro bono.
Oh, awesome.
We are not allowed to say her name or the name of her organization at this point. Mm-hmm. And someday I hope that we can.
Yes. Well, that's just awesome. I have high hopes for the organization. So
we do. We have high hopes for the organization, for secularism, for women in secularism, and for secular women. We think that this is an incredible time to be involved in the movement.
Awesome. So, Jen, Tracie, you got anything you want to say, talk about, ask, anything?
No, I just think it's great that you've stepped up and started this organization. It sounds pretty exciting. So I will definitely be joining.
Thank you. Yes. Everybody sign up. What are the fees to join?
The student fee is $10 and the basic membership is $20. And of course you can donate more.
Yes, and that's cheap. Everybody should pay twice that. Don't donate that, because that's a bargain right there. So is there any parting words or any last things or anything you want to talk about, Kim?
I don't think so. I think we are excited to be, like I said, we're excited to be part of the movement. We hope that people are excited about us and choose to join or support us. And please feel free to visit us at secularwoman.org or on our Facebook page, Secular Woman.
All right, and just one last question, because I know people get to it. Guys can join too, right?
Anybody can join who supports the mission.
All right. I was sure, but
I'm glad you asked. Clarity on that is needed.
yes. All right. So we will close this out. Remember, Secular Woman, and remember, bitches at atheist-community.org if you would like to talk to us. We've had some interesting conversations. So this is Beth signing out.
This is Jen. Have a good evening.
It's Tracie saying goodnight.
Good night, everybody. It's Kim.
All right. Bye.